Welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you're joining us this afternoon on this beautiful Wednesday. At least it's beautiful here in Wichita. I want to welcome you to our Tech Tips Hour with ABS Senior Technical Advisor, Bob Ripley. Bob is our Senior Technical Advisor who's out of Griffin, Georgia, and I'll let him do a little quick introduction, Bob.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. We're glad to have you again for the second time we've done this, and it worked so good the first time we decided to try it again pretty quickly. We're going to try to do another one in June. I'm Bob Ripley, Senior Tech Advisor for ABS. I've been with us about 15 years now, and we like to have you type your questions in, and we'll try to help you online. And if we can't, we'll take some information and get back with you later on. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bob, for being here and for doing this with us again. It was really well received last time, and I know a lot of people were very excited to get their questions answered by you kind of in person. So as you guys are joining us right now online, if you have technical questions for Bob, go ahead and start posting those in the comments section, and we will address those in the order that they're received, and we'll do as many as we can in this hour. And again, if you have, just like last time, if you have an aircraft model and serial number, please post that along with the question. That will help Bob as he's addressing these, kind of address them the best he can. And again, just a quick introduction for myself. I'm Lauren Bayles. I'm the Director of Member Services at the ABS headquarters in Wichita, Kansas. And so we're very excited to have everyone online with us today. And we'll get going here with questions. Bob, if you're ready, we've got our first question coming in.
Ready to go. Okay,
so we've got Randy O'Connor who asks, do you have any recommendations on how to preserve fuel bladders?
Keep them full. That's the best thing I can tell you. Fuel bladders are something that I saw one the other day that went 35 years. I've seen them go 5 years. The fuel in them keeps them soft, keeps them pliable, and they will last longer. The new bladders don't last as long as the old bladders do, so keep your original bladder as long as you can. But keep it full is the best thing you can do for it.
Perfect. And another question we have is, what is the difference between a pre-buy inspection and an annual inspection?
Okay, a pre-buy inspection or pre-purchase inspection, as we call it on our checklist on the ABS website, is basically a cursory inspection of the aircraft. Engine inspection, borescope, compression, open up some panels. You don't take the whole aircraft apart for a pre-buy. You look at the items that are most prevalent to be having issues, such as the landing gear, flight controls, things like this. An annual inspection, the whole aircraft is completely opened up, all the panels, all the interior, everything is open to be looked at.
Perfect. Okay, and kind of jumping back over real quickly to that fuel bladders question, we've got a follow-up question from Joshua Wheaton asking, I have an older bladder. Are there any risks of removing the drain with an Eagle flush drain?
Can you repeat that again, Lauren?
This is follow-up to the fuel bladder question earlier. He says, I have an older bladder. Are there any risks of removing the drain with an Eagle flush drain?
I think he's asking, is he removing the old drain and put an Eagle flush drain in? It's not a problem. If it's just the regular Eagle drain that he's taken out for some reason, it's still not a problem. Unloosen the clamp and pull the drain out. You shouldn't have any problem. It's best to do it on the Eagle drain. You have to do it with the tank empty, and you're going to have to reach inside the tank to hold it down to put the drain back in. On the regular quick drains that come from the factory, it's easier to do them with it full.
Okay, perfect. Okay, yeah, and he followed up there and he said replacing the original with an Eagle flush mounted, so yes.
It has to be drained to do that, yes.
Perfect. Our next question is from Greg Larson, and he says, is it possible to convert a 1968 36 to club seating as opposed to all forward-facing seats?
This is it depends answer. It depends on how the seat tracks and which seat tracks are installed in the airplanes. There is a kit that will allow you to convert the seat tracks into club seating, but it's pretty expensive. You can get it out of a salvaged airplane to do the conversion. Best thing to do is call me next week or send me an email. I can give you some more information on it because it's a pretty extensive job.
Okay, perfect. And our next one is from Dan Hill. He says, getting an overhaul on my IO 550 turbo normalized this week. Can you give me the best way to break in this engine?
Who's doing the overhaul? That's the question.
Sure.
Whoever is doing the overhaul is who should provide the break-in procedures. Each shop, each individual, each manufacturer does it the way they want it done because they're taking care of the warranty. So I would follow their recommended instructions. The biggest thing I can say here is make sure your fuel flow is correct, make sure your RPM is correct, and make sure your takeoff EGT is in the correct ranges for what it should be.
Perfect. Okay, and our next question is from Shep Johnson. He says, hi, thanks for taking my question. I've got a 1975 F33A, serial number is CE559, and I have some fuel seepage on both sides as evidenced by a trail of blue dye and the associated gummy buildup along the backside of each spar, which runs from as far outboard as I can see in the main gear wells all the way down to the jack points. Then it runs aft at the edge of the wing around the rearward wing bolt, then drips onto the floor. It will drip when the tanks are full, but when around 30 gallons or less, the drip seems to stop. What does this sound like to you? And then he has a follow-up question for that.
Two possible issues. First of all, would be the easiest one to take a look at would be remove the plate around the outboard fuel filler cap and check the screws on the fuel quantity transmitter that's located just after the filler cap. If those screws get loose, it will allow seepage to get out right there. The other problem is the vent nipple on the outboard end of the tank stays dry 99% of the time, because if you get fuel in the vent nipple, it comes out of the vent system. And as it gets dry over the years, the vent nipple will have a tendency to crack, and then when you fill the tank up, it leaks around the crack and will start a leak on the wing. If it's the vent nipple, the tank's got to be replaced. If it's the quantity transmitter, you could possibly change the gasket or just tighten up the screws.
Perfect. And then a follow-up to that same question from Shep says, what is good for cleaning off that gummy buildup? I've tried mild solvents like mineral spirits and gunk engine cleaner, but it doesn't do much.
Fuel works the best. Use the stuff that put it on there and it breaks the dye down. Just get a little bit of fuel on a rag and you got to rub hard to get it off. And don't leave it on there too long because it will stain the paint and you will not get it out. You've got to get it off immediately.
Okay, our next question comes to us from Tom Newman, who has a 3533 Debonair with an IO 470J. He said, what is your opinion of the Surefly Sim6 electric mag for the 7-to-1 red gas IO 470J? I can utilize the timing advance. Any experience with this and other electronic ignition with spark advance?
I don't have any experience with the Surefly system at all because it just was certified for our type engines. The actuator system has been certified for a number of years now, and I've got quite a bit of experience with that. I've installed it on several airplanes. I have one on my own airplane, and I really like the system. The cost is a little bit higher than the Surefly, but I think it does more for you because it will advance the timing anything below 25 inches of manifold pressure. So it's not good for a turbo normalized or turbocharged because you run above 25 inches most of the time.
Perfect. Okay, Juan Delazar asks, is it normal to see a very small leak one time from the fuel bladder when changing seasons? Tank was very full when this happened. Gummy and blue dye as well, not flown for 3 weeks.
Again, it could be the transmitters are just loose. Go check the transmitters first. We see that in our shop frequently. The screws on the cork gaskets compress a little bit. The screws will be just a turn loose and it'll cause just enough to seep out around the transmitter when the tanks are full. And all you got to do is take the plate off that surrounds the filler cap, and the transmitter is located right behind it. It's very simple to do.
Perfect. And Woody Fryer asks, he says, I have a Bonanza A36 from 1976. A recent AD addressing aileron cable ends inspection was valid through serial number E925. If I remember correctly, my serial number is E941. Should I be concerned about the cables?
No, sir, you should not, because after 925, serial number E926 and on, the suspect cable in that we're having so much problem with was moved to the wheel well where it gets airflow around it all the time after you take off and it dries it out. The other cable ends are located inside the cabin and that's what's causing the problem.
Perfect. And John Epley says, how many man hours do you estimate it will take to readjust the landing gear position indicator at the bottom of the center pedestal on my 1961 N35?
Well, John, I hate to say this, but it could take somewhere from an hour to 8 hours. That is not a fun job to do. If the rod and nothing is bent, and most of the time they are, people bend them trying to make it work right. If nothing's broken and everything is acceptable, it can be done in about an hour. But the airplane has to be on jacks to do it, because you have to check the upper end and the lower end. And remember, anytime you're going to raise the gear, you need a 14 or a 28 volt power supply. And on your airplane, it would be 14 volts.
Okay, perfect. And we got a question here from Roger Roberts. He says, specifically, where do you place LPS1 oil on the flap actuator? Just on the roller, or is it on the spindle? And does my F33A have 3 or 4?
Okay, we're placing LPS1. The only place we use it is on the flap limit switch roller, not the actuator. And if you have approach flap position, center position on the flap handle, you have 4 switches. If you only have up and down, you have 2 switches. Each switch has its own roller. Spray a little bit of LPS1 on the switch and roll the roller in your fingers so it frees it up. And it'll stay that way for the rest of the year.
Perfect. And then a question from Mark Taylor says, I have a 1979 V35B with an IO 550 conversion, and I just moved to Florida last fall. You're aware that it's quite warm in the summer in Florida. I'm considering adding air conditioning, the system that is going into new G36s. What, besides the comfort factor, are the pros and cons?
The new AC systems that is putting up in Tennessee is the one you're talking about, that just like the G36. It's a fully automatic system. It is an engine-driven compressor, not an electric compressor like the competitor is. So under most circumstances, it'll help give you a little bit better CG because it'll put a little bit more weight up front. So we'll improve your CG slightly. And it's a very efficient system the way it's designed, and it comes out of the overhead and not out of the panel like the factory air does. So everybody in the airplane gets air conditioning in the back seats and the front seats. And it's fully automatic. So all you do is set the temperature like your car. It turns on the heat or the air conditioning, whatever it needs.
Awesome. Perfect. And real quick, we'll jump back over and welcome everyone who's new. We've got a lot of people that have just started joining us here recently. So I wanted to welcome them and thank them for joining our Tech Tips time with Bob Ripley. If you're just joining us, in the comments section, you can post your questions for Bob, technical maintenance questions. Make sure you include the model and serial number if you have that handy so that he can properly address your questions. Again, Bob is our senior technical advisor out in Griffin, Georgia. And I'm Lauren Bayles, the Director of Member Services here in Wichita. And we're so thankful to have you doing this again today, Bob. It's been a huge success. People are really loving the opportunity to get to ask you questions and kind of see you face to face, especially since they won't get a chance to see you at Oshkosh this year, which is very, very sad. Yeah, so we'll have to figure out some way to make sure we get people the opportunity to continue to ask you questions like this, since we won't be together at Oshkosh. So how are you doing, Bob?
Doing fine, Lauren. Let's keep going.
Okay, awesome. We'll jump back into it. Okay, our next question is from Ryan, and he says, thanks for your time. He has an A36 from 1980. I do as much owner maintenance as possible. What is your general philosophy and procedure on sourcing Bonanza parts, and where do you even start?
Wow, that's a question that could take an hour.
We got time.
I search Bonanza parts all over the country. I have certain sources that I will go to, such as Textron, the supplier from the factory, and then there's a lot of dealers. Any Beechcraft dealer can sell you a Textron part direct from the factory. There's a lot of aftermarket parts for certain things, and certain things they're not approved. And there is some aftermarket parts that I would rather have a factory part because it fits better and it works better. If you're having a hard time locating a part, send me a text message on email on the forum page, or give me a call through the office and I'll be glad to help you find it. I have a program that will help find it in a location and maybe save you a little bit of money, or find you a new surplus part that's been sitting on the shelf for a while.
Perfect. And Mark, who earlier had the question about the air conditioning system, he said, are you aware of any service issues with the system?
No, we haven't had any service issues at all. What is his airplane, Lauren? Did he
Mark
tell you?
has the 1979 V35B with an IO 550.
It's a 24-volt airplane, so that'll help a lot. The 24-volt seems to work a little bit better because it has a bigger alternator on it, or you can put the bigger alternator on it. The 12-volt airplanes with the 60 and the 50 amp alternators don't handle it very well with the blowers, but the 24-volt airplanes do much better.
Perfect. And Tony Hale asks, do you capacity test batteries at annual? If so, is that reflected in the logbook entry?
We don't normally capacity test the ship's battery because we can do a load test on it. The standby battery for the G36s that is located under the glove box is a required annual capacity test item, and it must pass the capacity test with a full capacity tester. But a regular ship's battery, we just do a load test on it to make sure it'll carry a load, and it should be fine.
Perfect. And Mark Gillen says, I just purchased a 1984 836 with an IO 550 engine that is turbo normalized. It is a JPI engine monitor. During full power operation, the JPI shows 30 to 34 gallons per hour, while the original gauge shows 24. Is this normal? And if not, what could be the cause?
Okay, two things is the JPI, if it's using a different transducer to give the signal for the fuel flow from the factory transducer, the K factor could be out of adjustment on the JPI, or the K factor could be out of adjustment on the factory, but I doubt that. That's very, very rare that that happens. I suspect you have a K factor problem, which is a mathematical algorithm that counts the number of turns in the transducer and produces a gallons per hour readout for the fuel flow gauge to read. I would do a actual how much fuel you put in record to how much it says you need on one gauge on the JPI and see which one is accurate. If the K factor's off, the fuel required and the fuel added will not match. They should match by a gallon or two. So do a record after 3 or 4 fill-ups and see what it looks like, and then you can readjust the K factor. And JPI will be glad to help you if you call tech support and give you an approximate number to set it at. It's not hard to do, it's programming.
Perfect. Mark asks, who holds the STC on the speed slope windshield?
DeShannon had one, but I don't think they're producing it anymore. LP Aero Plastics holds one, and I think Great Lakes Aero Products produces one. I would suggest LP Aero Plastics. I like their windshield much better than the other ones. They seem to fit a little bit better.
Perfect. And Tom Newman asks, he says, I have same 3533 Debonair, serial number CD51. To add a fresh air vent on the co-pilot side, do I need to remove the wing? The vent inlet on the leading edge of the wing is in place. Other options to improve cooling have had barrel DeShannon exhaust scoop. Okay,
the vent that's on the kick panel down by your right leg in the co-pilot side, there is no tubing or anything that goes to the wing. And I don't know any way you could add one except put a scoop on the front or something like that to add a vent to the right side. Because there is no tubing or anything, the wing just mates up against the surface of the side of the fuselage and provides that air to that vent. The exit air in the cabin, make sure your cabin exhaust air is open all the way and make sure it is working and it is opening all the way so you can move air through the cabin. If you can't move air out of the cabin, you can't get fresh air in the cabin.
Perfect. Okay, and our next question comes to us from Danny Drew. He says, he heard about a turnbuckle issue in the tail section recently. Any word on this? And it seemed to be similar as the Aileron. He has an F-33A.
Yes, we had an F-33A a couple of weeks ago, have 2 trim cables broken. There was no suspect issue for it or anything that looked like was causing the issue. No duct above it or anything was dripping on it. And where the trim cables are located on that airplane, if somebody tries to go down the tail of the airplane and do maintenance or something, they could have laid on them or somebody could have leaned on them and bent them, and then they decided to break. It's not a good situation where they are if you have to do any maintenance down inside the tail. But there is nothing the same as what was happening with the aileron cable.
Perfect. And before we jump into the next question, I want to welcome everyone else who's just recently started joining us. We're doing a tech tip hour with ABS Senior Technical Advisor Bob Ripley. He is at his shop in Griffin, Georgia, and I'm Lauren Bayles, the Director of Member Services here in Wichita, Kansas, and we're happy to take your guys' questions today and get them answered by Bob. So as you're joining us, if you would like to continue to post your questions, your technical, your maintenance questions in the comments section in this live video, then we will try to address those in the order they're received, and we'll keep rolling with the questions here this afternoon. So thank you, Bob, for doing this for us. I know that we've got about 100 people right now online viewing this live right now at this moment. So
how many?
About 100.
Okay.
So that's great. So if you're ready, we'll go ahead and jump back into another round of questions.
Go for it.
Perfect. Okay, our next question comes to us from Mike, and he says he has a 1979 B55 IO470. How do you check the starter accumulators on an annual, and should I check them occasionally?
Well, Mike, there is no such thing as a starter accumulator. The only accumulators that a bearing would have on it would be a propeller unfeathering accumulator, which allows you to unfeather the prop without oil pressure from the engine if the system is operating correctly. The accumulators are located in the nacelle panel just behind the engine on the outboard side, and they need to be checked with a pressure gauge. And I think on your airplane, they're 100 PSI. If you check the air pressure, you put a gauge on and you get oil out. When you check the air pressure, oil squirts out. The accumulator needs to be replaced because the diaphragm's broken inside.
Okay, perfect. And then Mark Eggert says, what is an appropriate oil temp in cruise on an IO550? I'm getting about 150 to 155 degrees Fahrenheit and have been told this is not hot enough to volatilize water and other byproducts of combustion.
That's correct. If you can get it up to 170 to 175, you're going to do much better. My suggestion would just get some aluminum tape at your local big box store and tape off part of the oil cooler. Reach down in behind number 2 cylinder, just tape off a little bit of the oil cooler, maybe a half of it, and see if you can get the temperature to go up. And as the summer gets warmer and warmer and warmer, if you see it getting up to 180, a little bit hotter, take some of the tape off. That's the best way to change the temperature, easiest way.
Perfect. And then another question from Juan Delazar is, when should the flexible hoses be replaced? At a certain time or based on condition?
Well, they suggest every 5 years. Flexible fluid carrying hoses in the engine compartment. It's an expensive thing to do. It's probably $2,000 to replace an average hose set in an engine compartment. So if you've got hoses more than 10 years old, it might be a good idea to go ahead and do it. If you got a 10-year-old hose and you're going to be changing the engine in the next 6 months to a year, anytime you change the engine, we automatically change all the hoses.
Perfect. Okay, and this is from Shane. He has a 1977 turbo normalized A36 with an aftermarket air conditioner. The temperature difference between the front and the back is unbearable. To get the rear warm when flying high and the heat in the front is unbearable for the pilot. Any suggestions to increase airflow?
Cabin exhaust again. If you open the cabin exhaust air, you can move that heat to the back of the airplane because the exhaust goes out in the back of the airplane. And I'm not sure which aftermarket system you have on the air conditioning, but if it's the electrical one and most of the equipment's in the tail, then you're creating heat back in that area. But you just got to move air through the cabin. So I would look at your cabin exhaust first. Everybody thinks when you open the cabin exhaust, it's going to let the heat out, but it won't. It'll let the heat go to the back because the cabin is exhausting from the rear part of the cabin.
That makes sense. And then we've got Brian Tuttle from Carolina Aircraft who has a question. He says, we've had questions about tip tanks and the higher gross weight for Bonanzas and whether or not that extra weight has to be in fuel.
Wow. This is the question of the century. Everybody asked this question, and I have never been able to get a straight answer one way or the other from the STC holders that make the tip tanks. Everybody says that it's good empty and it's good full, but I have never been able to straight answer. I need to sit down and one day and just really read the STC and see what it says.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. And then this just came in from Joshua Wheaton, who says, okay, a bit of a seed question. What's Bob's take on certified TSOs versus experimental only instruments? Asking specifically about a Garmin G5, Dynon, etc. Does the TSO versus the experimental only make a difference? I know that I can legally install a TSO G5, but really for an electric instrument, I'm just paying for the TSO bureaucracy.
Okay, first of all, TSO does not mean it's approved to go in a certified airplane. TSO means it was built to a technical service order. For that instrument to be installed in your airplane, that your aircraft model must be listed in the approved model list for that instrument to be installed legally. It either has to be a PMA approved part, Parts Manufacturer Association approved part, or it has to have an STC to be installed in the airplane on a certified aircraft.
Okay, perfect. And Randy O'Connor asks, where is the static drain port in the cabin? He has a 1963 35B33.
63 B35.
Where is the static
Sometimes
drain?
Sometimes, Randy, it's in the tail, because the two static ports have one on each side behind the rear bulkhead, and in some airplanes they will put a drain on the left side right down at the bottom before the static line goes forward up the sidewall. Sometimes on the early airplanes it's in the fuel drain door underneath the bottom of the fuselage on the left side where you drain the bottom of your fuel selector valve. Sometimes you'll see a drain right there. But in most cases, it's in the back, attached into the system back there before the line goes forward.
Perfect. And Roger Roberts has another question at 33A. How can the back and forth rocking movement of the pilot and co-pilot seats be fixed, and how costly is that fix?
If you mean the tilt mechanism is moving back and forth, it sounds like the cams on the back of the seat are worn out, or you've got some parts worn out on the back of the seat. All of those little parts for the recline mechanism on the seats are very expensive. The pilot seat cannot have an infinite recline. It has to be a 3-position with a cam. So it goes click, 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 1 position, 2 position, 3 position. Some co-pilot seats and the passenger seats can have a hydraulic cylinder that would allow the seat to go infinite recline and all the way back to flat. So it just depends on the airplane and what installation you have. But the cam systems, you've probably got a broken gear on the cam, and the gears, aftermarket gears, are over $1,000 a piece.
Okay, perfect. And we'll just take a quick second here and welcome everyone else who's joining us right now. Thank you, everyone. We're doing a Tech Tip Hour with ABS Senior Technical Advisor Bob Ripley. He's at his shop in Griffin, Georgia, and I'm Lauren Bayles, the Director of Member Services at the ABS office here in Wichita. So as you're joining us, please feel free to go ahead and post your technical questions, your maintenance questions, anything you've been dying to ask Bob into the comments section, and we will get those addressed as soon as possible. Bob is with us this afternoon, spending about an hour here answering questions for you. So we'll try to answer them in the order they're received, and we'll get through as many questions as we can. So you doing good, Bob?
Doing okay.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and jump right back into it then. Okay, this is from David. He says, hi, Bob and Lauren. I have a 1990 F-33 turbo normalized with a new engine, about 50 hours. The engine alternate air light is illuminated on the ground, but not in the air. It just started on my last flight.
Okay, on your intake system on the engine, and it's normally on the left side under the cheek panel, the panel that's removable on the lower cowling section, you'll see a little tiny magnetic switch on the alternate air door. It sounds like the switch is just out of adjustment a little bit, or the door is opening just a little bit on the ground. It's probably just an adjustment of the switch, or maybe adjust the door just slightly. but you'll see the door and the switch right on the left side intake under the cheek panel.
Perfect. And Steve Tippett says he has an serial number E688. I have an old Century 3 Autopilot that has some issues. Do you think it is worth putting money into? I have heard that Autopilot Central in Tulsa can make it work like new.
They can make it work like new, and also Century Flight Systems in Mineral Wells, Texas can do it. You can make an appointment with them. You can fly out there to Mineral Wells, and they will fly with you. They'll go set the whole thing up, and if it needs to be a repair or something done, they take it in the shop, they go fix it, they put it back in the airplane, and they go fly with you, and they get it all adjusted. I've had a couple of people go out there, and we're very, very happy. Autopilot Central would probably do the same thing, but when you go to the factory that builds them, they've got exactly what they need. I've seen it on some of the old Century 2000s, the Century 3s, and the Century 4s.
Awesome. And our next question comes from Troy. He says, what are some things you look for, what are some things you look for when recommending engine top overhauls? I have a 1978 836 IO 520 with about 800 hours.
Okay. Basically, top overhaul, if you've got 4 cylinders out of the 6 with problems, it's better just to replace them all, because you're going to spend less money in the end, because you're doing the same labor to take the exhaust and the intake system apart to change 4 as you are to change 6. I would not overhaul your cylinders. With the price of cylinders now on the market, it's almost expensive to buy an overhauled cylinder as it is to go to a supplier and buy a brand new cylinder. No overhaul, never been on an airplane before, and it's within $100 to $200 to replace them with brand new ones compared to overhaul ones. Now, they're not nickel. If you want to put nickel on it, you're going to have to go with one of the suppliers of nickel, such as Ram Aircraft or somebody like that. And if you want to put nickel cylinders on, and if you don't fly a whole lot, then nickel's a great idea.
Perfect. Our next question comes from Chris Irish. He says, I have a 1981 F33A with an IO 550. Recently, my number 2 cylinder has started running hotter than usual. I struggle to keep it under 400 degrees in the summer months and cruise. The rest of the cylinders run about 30 to 40 degrees cooler. My baffling appears to be in good condition. The cylinder compression is good, and the valves have been checked and found in good condition. I've tried both lean of peak and rich of peak settings. Any ideas?
Okay, 2 things I'd like you to try. First of all, I would like you to go look with a flashlight behind the cylinder, and the oil cooler is located right behind number 2 cylinder. Look down at the bottom of the space and see if the rubber baffle that's at the bottom is down below the oil cooler. If the baffle is down below the oil cooler, what's happening is the air is coming across trying to cool number 2 cylinder, and it's going out the bottom because it's taking the path of least resistance. That baffle should be folded up onto the face of the oil cooler, and if it's too short or it's on the edge of being too short, get it up there, have your mechanic put some silicone on it and silicone it to the bottom of the cooler so it can't go below it. Make the air go across the oil cooler and stay around the cylinder. The second thing I'd like you to try, if the baffle is okay, is I would like you to remove the CHT probe from that cylinder, and I'd like you to put it in number 1 cylinder and put the number 1 cylinder in the number 2 cylinder and see if the problem moves. Probes are not infinite life. That's an easy troubleshooting skill to do. It'll prove the problem, and then you can just replace a $100 probe and you've solved your whole problem. Check the baffle first and then swap the probe if the baffle is okay.
Awesome. And Karen Kahn says, my mechanic recommends overinflation of the tires by about 10 PSI to allow for better wheel rotation for my 1975 B55 Baron. Any problems with this plan?
It's not necessary. The tire pressure is designed for that airplane based on gross weight. So unless you're flying at gross weight all the time, there's no sense putting more air in the tires. All it's going to do is wear the middle of the tire out and not the outside of the tire evenly, because it pushes the tire farther out and it stays more rounded than it does flat.
Perfect. And Our next question is from Dave McNall. He has a 1963 P35 IO470N. The fuel analog gauge and the JPI both fluctuate in cruise by about 0.3 to 0.5 GPH. Is this okay? If not, what should I have checked?
If both of them are fluctuating, because the JPI is coming off of a transducer, and the analog fuel pressure gauge, if you've got the original gauge still in it, is a direct reading pressure gauge. It's really not reading fuel flow, although it's marked for fuel flow. We may have something going on in the manifold valve on the top of the engine. A lot of people call it the spider, or we may have something going on in the fuel control. I would probably have a fuel system setup done on the engine and see if it meets the criteria for the Continental manual for the fuel system setup, and see if everything is okay. It shouldn't be fluctuating. If one's fluctuating, it could be a problem with the indicator, but if both of them are fluctuating, something's going on. And it may be RPM also, too. Make sure your RPM is steady.
Okay, awesome. And Roger Roberts, he had the question about the seat earlier. He says he's a clarification on my seat question. It is the seat rocking motion, which is back and forth, not the backrest. Does that change your answer?
Yes, there is a bushing, or not a bushing, it's a little spacer that can be installed in the bottom of the seat before it goes on the seat. It's installed in the airplane. It's a little plastic piece that pushes into the seat that takes up that space and allows it to rub. There is also a spacer that can be put under there. That little plastic bushing, be sitting down when you go look at the price though, because that little plastic button is about $300. But that can be stopped. There is shims going there, and it's in the parts manual of what to put in there.
Awesome. Our next question comes to us from Tina Lewis, and Tina says, just had a 15-hour IO470K cylinder diagnosed with an exhaust valve leak, only 2080 on the compression check. What is the likely cause, and will the cylinder need to be pulled? When running, I can hear an abnormal metallic sound.
Okay, with only 15 hours on the engine, we didn't know what, did it say what kind of engine or what kind of airplane?
No, she just said a 15-hour IO470K.
An IO470K, okay, I hear that now. You possibly could have a push rod that's not correct, because there is different length push rods for the K engine, and you could possibly have a push rod that's been installed and it's holding the valve off the seat just slightly. I would pull the valve covers and make sure that you have free play in the push rods in normal condition, and check that the right push rod is installed in the engine. That may be holding the valve open.
Perfect. Our next question is from Gary Burleson. He has a 1971 F33A, and he says, has a little over 6,000 hours and many years ago was a trainer. Should I have the wing bolts replaced?
Well, let's say this. Beach or Textron recommends removing the wing bolts every 5 years and doing an NDT, non-destructive inspection on them, and replacing them after 15 years. We don't agree with that. We have kind of said that 20-year replacement interval, because older airplanes, the bolts were installed with what we call the dry method. Now all the bolts are being installed under the wet method to prevent corrosion in the wing bolt fitting and along the shank of the bolt. If the bolts look okay, it's not mandatory to change them. We've never seen an actual wing bolt failure because it's such a strong structure. If you want to change them for peace of mind, that would be great. You're probably talking a couple of $1,000 to do all 8 wing bolts and nuts and hardware and put them in under the new wet method, and then they require a retorque in 100 hours.
Okay. Our next question is from Justin Dempsey. He said, I had a dual yoke installed on my 1980 836 and then found I have to input some left aileron to fly straight and level. Is this an issue with rigging, or is this due to the dual yoke install?
Well, if it didn't do it when the single yoke was in there and everything was okay, is it the wheel that's not straight, or is it the airplane that's not straight? because the only thing the yoke would change would be the wheel position. And does he say what kind of airplane? I didn't hear it.
Yeah, a 1980 A36.
Okay, so it has to have the aileron trimmer on it. The aileron trimmer could be part of the problem. Or like I said, it could be in the yoke itself. But if it didn't fly that way with a single yoke, I suspect there's a problem in the yoke.
Okay, perfect. And our next one comes from Mark No. He has a 1966 V35 that he just purchased. The fabric is missing on the inside of the landing gear doors. How important is this fabric, and should I have it replaced?
It is very, very important, Mark. It's what it's there for. That door is a bonded structure. In other words, there's a skin on the outside, and the structure where the holes that you're seeing is bonded to the outer door. And if we don't allow air to get in that area, then it'll start corroding from the inside out, and you'll see big holes in the outside of the door. You need to use regular dope and fabric on that with dope, and if you want to put color and everything, you can go that far. We normally glue new patches on, and we put 2 coats of dope on them and leave it alone so the door can still breathe. Don't put metal tape. Don't put duct tape, because it can't let the air in. You've got to get air into that area so that door can breathe and dry out.
Very good. And our next one is from Win Poe. He says, can an early 836 that has not had the aileron AD complied with be ferried to have the inspection done?
Let me read the AD real quick. Hang on, I got it right here.
Sure.
I don't think so. I think it's mandatory. Let's see, it says, give me just a second, Lauren.
You're fine.
It says within 30 days after November 22nd, 2019, inspect the cable. And it says before further flight. I'm reading this real quick here. After the inspection required, the following actions. I would say I'd be scared to fly it. It would make me nervous. As many problems as we've seen. We've had almost 100 of them with issues. And I would be very nervous to do it. It's not a big process. Pull the rear seats, pull the spar cover, at least go look at it and make sure it's okay before you fly the airplane.
Okay.
Have somebody come in and look at it. Your life is worth a few extra bucks.
Yeah. Okay, before we hop into the next set of questions, I just want to welcome everyone else who's joined us in the last half hour or so. So welcome everyone. We're doing a tech tips time with ABS Senior Technical Advisor Bob Ripley. He's at his shop in Griffin, Georgia today, answering your questions. And I'm Lauren Bayles, Director of Member Services at the ABS office here in Wichita, Kansas. So as you guys are joining us, please feel free to post your questions in the comments section in our video here, and we'll try to get those addressed. Make sure that you're putting the model of your aircraft and the serial number if you have that, if that's applicable to your question, so that Bob can properly address everything. And we appreciate you all joining us today. And just as a follow-up, we will be saving this and posting this video on our YouTube page next Monday, the 25th, as a part of the ABS Hangar series. So if there's something you missed the first half, or you want to rewatch it because it's such great information, we will have this permanently archived on our YouTube page. So you can definitely go back and take a peek at that anytime as well. So before we hop back in, Bob, how are you doing?
Doing okay.
Okay, awesome. Well, we will jump back into some more questions here. Our next question comes to us from Randy New. He had an annual due in August, at least 3 mandatory inspections due in about 25 hours. Oops, let me scroll back up. Can it wait until annual? That would probably be 40 to 50 hours from now, so I'd run about 15 to 25 hours over.
No. An AD, by the book, is allowed to run up to 10 hours over, unless it's specified that it must be done at exactly the right time. And there is some out there like that. But if you go 10 hours over, you have to revert to the original time to do the next one. So if it's a 100-hour AD, if you do it at 10 hours over, you don't get another 100 hours, you only get 90 hours. So if ADs need to be done on time. Some ADs have to be done on time. They don't even allow you to go over. But on most of them, you can go over by 10 hours, to get it to a place to do the maintenance. But like I said, you revert back to the original time for the next due date.
Perfect. Colin Cross says, my landing gear box on my 63P does not have the 1/8 to 1/4 inch play at the end. I'm thinking dynamic brake is bad. How do I test?
Okay. On a 12-volt airplane, you have no dynamic brake relay. All that happens is when the power shuts off in the up position or the down position from the switches under the pilot seat, the motor then grounds the opposite direction, or the other switch grounds the opposite direction of the motor and turns the motor into a brake. If you're not stopping at all and you're hitting mechanical stops on both ends, my first suspect would be the motor itself or a bad ground on the motor. Check the black wire coming out of the motor. Make sure the ground connection to the aircraft is tight and secure and clean. If that's all good, I would have the motor overhauled.
Perfect. And Scott Spittler says, Bob, we need your opinion. Our family has a V35 with 1,200 hours on the bottom end and 350 hours remaining on ECI cylinders. Assuming 1,550 hours on the bottom end when the ECI cylinders time out, would you recommend a factory major overhaul or just another top end to replace the cylinders per the AD? The engine runs like new and oil pressure is in the upper end of the operating range. I feel as if we're right at the breaking point for major versus top overhaul.
Yeah, you're between the proverbial rock and the hard place. This becomes a money point at this time. You're going to have 1,500 hours on an engine. I don't think I would invest $6,000 or $7,000 in an overhaul or put more cylinders on it. I would rather see you spend that money to replace the engine with an overhauled engine or get that one overhauled. I think you'll be money ahead in the end. You may get it to fly to 22 or 2,300 hours, but you're going to spend a lot of money to do that. That could be put towards a new engine.
Perfect. And Michael Law says, hey, Bob, I have a 74 836 with double yoke that faces V down. I see that some have the V facing up, which might improve legroom. Can these be changed? And if so, under what approval? Thanks.
Okay. If it's a standard Beechcraft yoke with the locking pin on the right side, you cannot move it the other way. If it's a Signet yoke, which is an aftermarket manufacturer, Signet Aerospace makes a yoke, it does not use a locking pin. It uses an Allen screw, and it is approved to be mounted in the V up position. And that's what most people do because it gives much, much more leg room, as you stated. But a factory yoke has to be mounted V down so it locks in the proper position.
Okay, and Mark Taylor says, I recently identified about 17 different types of screws that I'd like to replace with stainless steel on my 1979 V35B. What is the easiest way to identify the necessary replacement, both in terms of size and where to buy them? Went to a parts house recently and they only had 2 and could give me no guidance on where to get the rest.
Okay, the only screws on the whole airplane that can't be stainless steel are the aileron attach screws. There's 16 screws on there, 8 on each aileron, 4 on the top and 4 on the bottom. Those are special screws. You cannot put a standard screw in there. They have to be a structural loading screw. There's a lot of companies, I think Aircraft Spruce does it, Performance Aero does it. They make screw kits for your airplane. That would be your best bet, is to buy a stainless steel screw kit. And it should have everything in it you need, probably with some extras. That would be the easiest way for you to do it. Take the screw out, match it up with what you have in the kit, and put another one in its place.
Perfect. And then Mickey Howard has a 35B33 IO550. And I had spoken to you he says, I had spoken to you in the past about a fuel surge in cruise lop. Had fuel pressure set and altitude compensating fuel pump rebuilt, still has the same problem. Any ideas?
it sounds like it's in the altitude pump. I don't particularly care for those pumps because we have so much problem with them. I would, if you'll call me tomorrow, I will send you the scheduling sheet for the IO 550 and give you what the fuel flow should be at the different altitudes. This test is required each and every annual inspection to verify that the pump is on, the auto scheduling of the pump is working correctly. If it's not, it can be adjusted, but the altitude pumps, even after they've been rebuilt, we still have problems with them, keeping them adjusted correctly.
Yeah, perfect. And let me jump back over here real quickly since we're coming into the last 10 minutes of the hour here. So we want to thank everyone who's just now joining us and maybe getting your questions in now. We still have time, so don't worry, we'll be able to get to the questions that we still have posted. So thank you everyone for joining us. We've got ABS Senior Technical Advisor here, Bob Ripley. He's the man. Everyone knows it. They call and ask for Bob because they have technical questions. And as you can tell, Bob just knows it. He can just spit it out. It's amazing, Bob. So thank you for being so knowledgeable and for caring so well for our members and for doing this for us today. And, you know, you've gone through so many questions already. So thank you so much for doing this for us. You still doing okay?
Yeah, they can't see the earpiece. People's telling me the answers.
Oh, Bob, you're so funny. Yeah, no, Bob really is the best of the best. He knows just about everything. And, you know, if he doesn't, he'll tell you. But it's
Sure.
very, very few things that he doesn't just know right off the top of his head. So we're going to jump back into some questions here. If you still have questions for Bob, feel free to post those in the comment section here in our live stream. We'll get to as many as we can here, and we'll follow up with you. If for some reason we're unable to answer your question today, we'll follow up with you. But yeah, please post the model and serial number of your aircraft if that's applicable with your question for Bob, and we'll just jump back in.
Okay.
Okay. So this one is from Fred Metz. He says, Bob, my 1960 M35 has just had a lot of work done on the gear doors, not closing completely. New push rod seals, broken ignition key, new cylinders, etc. And it's flying well. I had a factory rebuild on the IO 470 1,700 hours ago. How long can I safely fly before another major if I watch the oil samples, etc.? Can just checking the valve movement with a good caliper be a good indicator of cam wear?
Not really. If the engine is running good and your oil sampling are coming back normal and you're changing your oil at 1,700 hours on it, I would change oil every 25 hours. Oil is cheap. Change oil every 25 hours. Don't change brands. Keep using the same oil you've been using the whole life of the engine. Change the filter, change the oil every 25 hours, keep the sampling going. And if you start to see a trend happening of a certain type of metal going up, then it's time to investigate. But I've got several customers that are over 2,000 hours on engines and they're still going strong. But most of them fly at least 100 hours to 150 hours a month. But they fly a lot. But I have no problem going past TBO as long as you take the time to do the extra things and more frequent oil changes. Have it looked at. Just keep an eye on it.
Perfect. And Kevin Morris says he has a 1964 B55 with an IO 470L and engines that came out of annual recently, and it seems that the right engine is burning about a gallon more per hour than it used to, and was wondering if this could be related to a fuel computer issue or ignition timing. Fuel pressure is the same based on aircraft instrument installed, including manifold pressure and RPM. Fuel burn per engine was the same before the annual and on the JPI fuel computer.
Okay, it sounds like you may have a pump just changing a little bit. I would do a fuel system setup on both engines and make sure you set your system at the max limit so you get good fuel flow for takeoff. It doesn't sound like with only a gallon an hour difference, you could change the mixture control a little bit and make that balance out on a twin. It's hard to get most twins to burn exactly the same fuel all the time. I owned a Baron for many, many years, and every once in a while I get it to do just right, but little things change in the pump, and as the pump wears, one wears more than the other one, and it changes. If you want to check it to make sure you're getting max fuel flow, just make sure on takeoff that your EGT is somewhere around 1300 and you're at takeoff RPM on both engines and your fuel flow is up where it needs to be. On the 470L, we want to be up around 25 gallons an hour, 24 and a half to 25 gallons an hour.
Perfect. And Jimmy Lewis says he has a 1966 V35 and the yoke sits at the 1 o'clock position. How do I get it to set at the 12 o'clock?
Okay. I own a 66 too, and I understand what you're saying here. But what we need to be careful of here is if the airplane is flying straight and all the rigging is good, then it's simple as repositioning the chain in the yoke, in the column itself, and then putting the column back on. But before you do that, you need to have somebody that knows what they're doing, check the ailerons to make sure somebody has not adjusted the ailerons and got the yoke pulled off that way, and they're trying to adjust the airplane. Because when you have the ailerons level, the bell crank in the wing should be facing straight forward and aft. And if they're pulled one way or the other, somebody's playing with the cables, trying to get the airplane to fly straight, and now they pull the yoke off, but they got the airplane flying straight. You got twofold here that you need to look at. Check the rigging first. If the rigging's okay and the bell cranks are okay and everything looks good, reposition the chain one tooth in the wheel, and that'll bring it back where it needs to go.
Awesome. And Mary Lou Anderson says, I have a 65 S35 with an STEC, STEC 60 Autopilot. Initial activation of altitude hold kicks out on the first flight of the day. It seems as it warms up, it stops kicking out. We have replaced both servos, but that doesn't seem to have helped. Any suggestions?
Well, I had the same problem on my airplane when I had a 60-2, and we ended up having a capacitor on the pitch servo board was getting cold, and once it warmed up, it was better. And we did some experiments in flight one day and sprayed some freeze spray on it, and we made the altitude kick out. We sent the computer in and had that capacitor changed. STEC is aware of this problem. I would call and talk to Doug out there at STEC and see if they can help you with that, because this problem has happened to other people, and there's one certain component on the board that can be replaced and it may eliminate your problem.
Awesome. Okay, and it looks like we have one more question we'll squeeze in here right at the nick of time. How difficult is it to install a shoulder harness?
Does they say what kind of airplane?
No.
No. Again, it depends on the airplane. If the airplane is an A36 and it's already got the bracket in the ceiling, it's a very, very simple process. If it's an older V-tail, the overhead's got to come down. You've got to install some brackets in the ceiling and everything like that. And it's a little bit longer process, but it's about a day's worth of work on the older ones, and probably a half to 3/4 of the day if it's already got the bracket in the overhead. That's with the BAS system, which is the 4-point system, 2 over the shoulder and a new lap belt, and they all hook together, which I really like because it gives you good, you can still move in the cockpit and it works fine. I would say 8 hours at least.
Yeah. Okay. And Danny says, Bob, did you say that someone flew 100 over 150 hours per month?
Yeah, I've got several customers. No, a year.
A year. Okay, there you go, Danny.
I got several customers that do 40 to 50 a month.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Wow.
They're business airplanes and they fly a lot.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I may have said a month. I didn't mean a month. I meant a year.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of hours.
That would.
Excellent. Well, you know, we're here at the top of the hour, and I just want to say a huge thank you to Bob. My goodness. Sure. What would we do without you, Bob? You really are the best. So thank you so much for answering all of these questions. So
that's all the questions?
Yeah, we hit all the questions that came in.
I can't believe I timed out as good as it did last time too.
I know. How perfect is this?
I know it.
So yeah, thank you, Bob. Really appreciate it. And thank you to all the members who've joined in with us. We really appreciate you doing this and coming in, being a part of this and making this fun and engaging for us. So if you're not a member, I'll say this, if you're not a member of ABS, asking questions like this to Bob is something you can do 5 days a week as a member of ABS. You can call into our office and talk to Bob or any of the other 4 technical advisors. We have staff on the phones 5 days a week for you. Additionally, you can post your technical or maintenance questions in the tech tips section of our website, bonanza.org. So I would highly recommend going to bonanza.org and joining the American Bonanza Society if you're not already. This is just one of the many, many, many benefits you get as being a member. And so thank you again to Bob for joining us today and for doing this, and for all the members that have tuned in and asked your questions. We will be saving this video and it will go up on the ABS YouTube page on Monday morning. We have an ABS Hanger series, and this will be our installment for next week. So if you're not already subscribed to our YouTube channel or our YouTube page, jump on there and just search for the American Bonanza Society. We're right there. You can also engage with us on our Facebook page, our Instagram page, our Twitter page. We have all the different social platforms, so make sure you engage with us there. And Bob, I just want to let you know, you can't see this right now. You've got a flood of comments from people just saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Lots of thank yous. So thank you, Bob, so much for doing this. We appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who tuned in today.
Thanks everybody for calling, and we enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. And also, real quick, a huge shout out to Dara Quested at the ABS office right now. She's been managing and helping with all the comments. So you've seen her behind the scenes here. So thank you so much, Dara. Super appreciate you. Couldn't have done this without you. And hope everyone has a great day and take care.
Thanks.